Hello and welcome to edupediaworld.com. Having introduced the isoquants, which was the basic tools of analysis, we now return back to the laws of returns to scale. Now, as we have already gone through that in the long run, all the factor inputs which are used for production is variable in nature. So now under this law, we'll study that what will be the effect on the output when we change all the inputs related to the production. So we get here that when a firm expands its scale, that is, it increases both the inputs. Now here both the inputs can be categorized into labor and capital. The inputs proportionately, then there are three possibilities. The first one being the total output may increase more than proportionately, which means that if I double the use of labor and capital, my output will be more than doubled. Total output may increase proportionately, which means that if I double my use of labor and capital, the output will be also doubled. Total output may increase less than proportionately, and this means that if I double the use of labor and capital, my output will be less than doubled. Now, these three possibilities gives us three conditions. The first being law of increasing returns to scale. Now, under this law, the first condition is proved that if output increases more than proportionately as compared to the increase in input, that exhibits increasing returns to scale. Now, through a production function, we'll see the law of increasing returns to scale. See, the inputs used can be categorized into labor and capital. And in this case, the production function will be like I'm doubling the use of labor and doubling the use of capital. But what I get is quantity which is more than doubled. We can see this with the help of a graph also. On x-axis I take labor, and on y-axis I take capital. And as a result I get three isoquant curves. This is isoquant curve 1 where I get the quantity produced as 10 units. This is 2 where 25 units, and this is 3 where I get suppose 50 units. 1L, 2L, 3L, and this is 1K, 2K and 3K. So here we can see very clearly that as I move from point A to B, I am doubling the use of labor and doubling the use of capital, but the quantity I get is more than doubled. That is, I am increasing the labor and capital by 100%, but the quantity which I get is increased by 150%. Now, how can we calculate this? It's very simple. It's final quantity minus initial quantity upon initial quantity into 100. So I get 150%. Similarly, when I move from point B to C, we can see that I am increasing the use of labor and capital by 50%, but the quantity which I get is increased by 100%. We can calculate this in the same way, that is final quantity minus initial quantity upon initial quantity into 100, which is 100%. So it must be very clear that as I increase the labor and capital, my quantity, the output gets increased more than the increase in the labor and capital. In the first case, the input was increased by 100%, and in the second case, the input was increased by 50%. So this particular situation exhibits the law of increasing returns to scale. Now let's see what are the reasons behind the increasing returns to scale. That is, we are going to study the factors behind increasing returns to scale. First one is technical and managerial indivisibilities. See, what happens is certain inputs, for example, mechanical equipments, managers, which are used in the production process are available in a given size. Such inputs cannot be divided into parts to suit small scale of production. So when the scale of production is increased, these inputs can be utilized to their optimum efficiency. That is why there is an increase in the quantity produced as compared to the increase in the inputs used in the organization, in the production process. See, next factor is higher degree of specialization. Now, when the scale of production increases, we can go for specialized labor for each and every department. For example, we can settle out a finance department, we can form a HR department, production department, marketing department, and we can have separate managers for all these departments, and which who have a special expertise in the field they are managing. So this will increase more efficiency in the organization. It will lead to minimum wastage of resources, optimum utilization of resources, and which will increase the quantity produced in the organization. Next factor is dimensional relations. Some aspects are connected to the increasing the dimensions. For example, when the length and breadth of a room are doubled, then the size of the room is more than doubled. Similarly, when we increase the diameter of a pipe, the flow of water is more than doubled. So some aspects are related to dimensional relations. So when the labor and capital are doubled, similarly, the output also gets more than double because they involve themselves into teamwork, and they are, because specialized force, they can more optimally use the resources available to them. So that is why the output increases more as compared to the increase in the inputs. So these were the factors behind increasing returns to scale. Let's move on to the second possibility, that is when the increase in output is proportionate to the increase in input, it exhibits constant returns to scale. That is, suppose if I double my labor and capital force, the quantity produced will also get doubled. So that situation is constant returns to scale. Let's see how. Again, I will show you a production function. We can see here, as we double the quantity of labor and capital, the output is also doubled. So this production function shows constant returns to scale. We can depict this with the help of a graph also. On x-axis we take labor, on y-axis we take capital, and we get three isoquant curves. by this combination of labor and capital. Isoquant curve 1, 2 and 3. 1L, 2L and 3L. Likewise 1K, 2K and 3K. So in isoquant curve 1 we get the units of production as 10, in isoquant curve 2 we get the units of production as 20, and in isoquant curve 3 we get the units of production as 30. So we can see here that as I am moving from point A to point B, I am doubling the use of labor and capital, and my output is also doubled. I am increasing the use of labor from 1L to 2L, and I'm increasing the use of capital from 1K to 2K, and my quantity is also, the output produced is also exactly doubled. Similarly, when I am increasing the use of labor and capital by 50%, my quantity also gets increased by 50%. The output also gets increased by 50%. See, we can calculate it like this. The quantity increase is, the change in quantity is 100%, and here I have changed the input also by 100%. Similarly, from B to C, the change in quantity output produced is 50%. And here the input also, I have increased the input also by 50%. So this particular situation depicts law of constant returns to scale, that is, the output changes proportionately as compared to the change in input. By whatever amount I change the input, my output also changes in the same proportion. Now, what are the reasons behind the constant returns to scale? It is due to the limits of economies of scale. See, with expansion in the scale of production, economies arise from such factors as indivisibility of fixed factor, then greater possibility of specialization of capital and labor, use of more efficient techniques of production, etc. But there is a limit to the economies of scale. When economies of scale reach their limit and diseconomies are just about to begin, then comes the constant returns to that. At that particular point comes the constant returns to scale. And the constant returns to scale takes place also where factors of production are perfectly divisible and where technology is such that labor capital ratio is fixed. So that is why the constant returns to scale is exhibited under long run. Now let's see what are the reasons behind this behavior. That is, why do output increases proportionately to the increase in the input? It is because of limits of economies of scale. See, if we increase the production beyond a certain level, beyond a certain limit, up till a certain point we get advantages of the increase in scale of production, but beyond a certain point we start inculcating disadvantages related to increase in the scale of production. So at that particular point where diseconomies of increase in scale of production are about to start, there we get constant returns to scale. That is, our output increases in the same ratio as we increase the input related to the production. And after a certain point of increase in the scale of production, like we have discussed that when we are reaping up the economies, the certain factors of production are indivisible. But after a certain point, the factors of production also becomes divisible. So at that particular point where the factors of production start becoming divisible and the cost of procuring material and other things start rising, at that particular point we like exhibit the scale of production, exhibit this particular behavior, that is constant returns to scale. So this is why we face constant returns to scale, the law of constant returns to scale in the long run. Now, the third possibility which we have discussed gives rise to the law of decreasing returns to scale. Now, this particular behavior is exhibited when we see that if we increase the input but the output does not increases in the same proportion, that is, there is less than proportionate increase in the output as compared to the input. The firms are faced with decreasing returns to scale when a certain proportionate increase in input leads to a less than proportionate increase in output. Let's understand this with the help of production function. See, in this particular case, suppose if the production function is given by 2L, 2K, that is we are increasing, we are doubling the use of labor and capital, the output will be less than doubled. So this is what happens in case of decreasing returns to scale. If we try to exhibit it through with the help of a graph, it will be like this. On x-axis, we take labor. On y-axis, we take capital. And again, we get three isoquant curves. Q1, Q2 and Q3. In the first isoquant curve, the output produced is 10 units. In the second isoquant curve, the output produced is 18 units, and in the third one, it is 24 units. So we can see here that as we are increasing the use of labor from 1L to 2L, that is, we are doubling the use of labor, and simultaneously we are also doubling the use of capital from 1K to 2K, but our output is not doubled, it is less than doubled. If we move from point A to B, we see here we are doubling the use of labor and capital, but our output is less than doubled. We are increasing the labor and capital by 100%, but what is the effect on the output? It's less than 100%. It's just 80%. Whereas similarly, when we are moving from point B to point C, that is, we are increasing the use of labor and capital by 50%, but our output increases only by 33.3%. We can calculate it as follows, that is, final output minus initial output upon initial output into 100, which is equal to 33.3%. So in this case, the input increases by 50%, but the output increases only by 33.3%. And in this particular case, the input increases by 100%, but the output increases only by 80%. So we can see here that this particular situation exhibits the law of decreasing returns to scale. That is where the output does not increases proportionately to the increase in the inputs used. Let's see what are the reasons behind such behavior. We attribute the reason behind diminishing returns to scale to diseconomies of scale. See, when we increase the scale of production, we see that the managerial efficiency does not increases in the same proportion. That is, the same manager has to now manage a big organizations, and if we employ more managers to the same department, then there would be differences in their decision making capabilities, which actually hampers the efficiency of the organization. So the managerial efficiency does not increases in the same proportion. The same thing is the other factor which we can attribute to diminishing returns to scale is that there is a limit to the use of natural resources. Suppose if we double the coal mining organization, it will not double the output, it will not double the production of coal, because there is a limit in which coal can be produced. It is a natural resource and it is not available in abundance. So that is why also the law of diminishing returns to scale starts operating due to the increase in the scale of production. So this was all about the long run law of production. That is, we have studied here about the isoquant curves and how this tool of analysis helps us to analyze the law of returns to scale, which was divided again into three possibilities, that is increasing returns to scale, constant returns to scale, diminishing returns to scale. In the next session, we'll be continuing with the various approaches to production function. Till then, have a nice time and thank you for watching Edupedia World.